Come in closer for just a moment. Let the noise of the day rest outside this small circle we're drawing together. You don't need to carry anything in here except your breath and the small spark of curiosity that's always waiting for you at the edge of sleep. Tonight we're going to drift gently into a question older than your bones and quieter than your thoughts. We're going to ask why we dream, but not to answer too quickly. Instead, we'll follow that question the way a child trails a kite across a dusk field, letting it pull us into places that feel both impossibly far and achingly familiar. I should warn you softly before we begin. Once you let your mind wander this way, it might become hungry for more than rest. It might crave a glimpse of how it is wired to wonder. That's perfectly fine. I'm here for you, always ready to guide you back when the edges feel too wide. If at any point you feel your thoughts slipping like sand through your fingers, just know this space is here for you, calm and patient. Remember, you can listen wherever you feel most at ease, lying beneath blankets, looking up at the ceiling, or outside beneath a drifting sky. Now, take a breath, and we'll step together into the soft threshold where waking unravels and dreaming begins to weave its quiet tapestry. I like to imagine the mind at night as a house with many rooms. Some rooms are bright with memories you replay without meaning to, a laugh you wish you'd held onto longer, a word you wish you hadn't said. Others stay locked until darkness slips under the door like a stray cat and curls up in the corners. Tonight, I find myself in one of those rooms where a single question hums like a distant star. Why do we dream at all if sleep is just for rest? Why fill it with stories that vanish when we wake? The science books say dreams are chemical sparks, neurons firing off signals like small electrical storms. But that never feels like enough. Not when you remember how a dream can make you taste snow you've never touched or see the face of someone you haven't thought of in years. Sometimes I stand by my window before bed and look at the way the streetlights cast halos in the fog. There's a kind of dream in that, too, the way light travels, bends, spills into corners it doesn't belong. A photon leaves a star hundreds of light years away and eventually finds the soft back of your eye, whispering an image that never truly belongs to the present moment. In that sense, we're all dreaming constantly, taking an old light, weaving it into now, pretending we see the world as it is rather than how it arrives. I remember one night years ago when I took my small telescope onto the roof. It was cold enough for my breath to make small ghosts. I found Orion first, his belt easy to spot even when the city's glow smothered the weaker stars. I thought about how the light from those stars started its journey long before I was born. How even if one winked out right now, it would keep shining in my sky for lifetimes. It felt like standing in the past and the future at once. Maybe that's what dreams are too, a chance to fold time, to touch moments you can't touch awake. Sometimes they stitch together pieces that make no sense on paper, but feel perfect when you're inside them. You wake up and tell someone you dreamt of a door that opened into a forest that wasn't a forest at all but an ocean, and the only thing you remember clearly is that it made sense in the way music makes sense even when you can't hum the tune later. There's a sweetness in not remembering it all. It keeps us curious. If we could replay our dreams perfectly each morning, they might lose their soft edges, their shimmering impossibility. Maybe that's why they slip away when we try too hard to hold them. They are not built to be captured but to remind us we are more than what we see in mirrors and calendars and bank statements. They remind us that part of the mind is a frontier we can visit but never colonize. Lately I've started noticing the small moments right before I drift off. That delicate float when a thought breaks apart into images I didn't plan. Last night, it was a bridge stretching across a river I've never crossed. A stranger waited at the other end, but didn't speak. I remember feeling no fear, only the quiet certainty that I knew them somehow, that they were me in a shape I hadn't worn yet. Sleep took me before I could ask their name. It's funny how we spend so much effort building routines to protect us from the unknown, while our minds open wide every night and let the unknown pour in. We lock our doors, set alarms, plan our schedules down to the hour, yet inside our heads we wander unguarded streets and climb impossible staircases. Maybe it's a safety valve. Maybe it's a rehearsal for waking life's uncertainties. Or maybe it's just the mind's way of stretching its legs, reminding itself it's bigger than the boundaries we draw around it. Tonight, if you find yourself drifting toward the edge where thoughts become scenes, I hope you remember this. Every dream, even the ones that slip through your fingers, leaves something behind. A softness in the morning light. A question you can't quite phrase, but feel resting on your tongue. The faint sense that you're carrying more than just yourself through each day. So for now, let the world outside settle into its own gentle sleep. The roads grow quiet, the buildings sigh into their foundations, and above it all, old light still travels, looking for an open window, an upturned eye. Let your own mind become that window. Let it wander through its rooms and hallways and secret gardens. Don't rush to understand. Don't hold too tightly. Just drift. Somewhere in that drifting, you may find what you didn't know you were missing. A story without an ending, a question that feels like home. And when you wake, perhaps you'll carry a small piece of it with you, a reminder that the mind, for all its restless planning and worrying and remembering, is also built for wonder, for softness, for dreaming. I woke before the sun today, though it's hard to say if I truly woke or if some part of me simply drifted into a gentler layer of awareness. There's a soft hush in the hour before dawn, when the world feels like it's holding its breath just to see if you'll notice how alive it really is. I sat up in bed without turning on a light, and listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the only heartbeat other than my own. Even the clock on the wall seemed hesitant to tick too loudly, as if it too might drift back to sleep if I didn't watch it too closely. There's a strange peace in being awake when the rest of the neighborhood still dreams. You can almost feel their wandering minds pressing against your own, like 1,000 gentle wings beating in the same dark air. It makes me wonder if dreams ever touch each other, if the stories that play behind closed eyes ever brush past one another like drifting ships in a midnight harbor. Maybe in some vast unseen way our sleeping selves share a common ocean, and every so often two dreamers find themselves on the same shore without ever knowing it when they wake. I think about this as I slip on my slippers and shuffle toward the window, where the first pale hint of dawn leans shyly into the dark. The street below is empty, but the lamplight still glows like small moons strung along the road. I rest my forehead against the cold glass and let my breath fog the pain just a little. There's comfort in this small ritual of seeing my own warmth miss the clear surface then vanish. It reminds me how fleeting everything is, how soft and momentary our marks can be. Somewhere out there beyond the roofs and the streetlights, the sky is still filled with ancient light. I remember reading once that the faint stars we see just before dawn are often the oldest, their photons older than the language we use to name them. In a way, every glance upward is a kind of time travel, a quiet promise that even what is long gone can still touch us if we're willing to look. I pull my old sweater closer around my shoulders and think about what dreams carry from such places. Science will say dreams come from within the brain, a complex interplay of memory and emotion and electrical impulses. But I've always wondered if maybe we tune ourselves to something bigger when we sleep. Maybe our minds pick up signals that have been drifting through space for centuries, bits of thought or feeling that never found a home until we open ourselves to receive them. There's a comfort in that idea that even our most private dreams might be woven from threads spun far beyond us, that in sleep we are not islands, but receivers, part of a soft collective we cannot see. I leave the window and make my way to the small table in the corner where my old telescope waits. I haven't used it in months, maybe longer, but tonight feels like a night for small rituals. I open the sliding door to the balcony and step into the cool pre-dawn air, the concrete beneath my feet sending a brief shiver up my spine. I turn the telescope toward the thinning darkness and find a patch of sky just above the roofs where the stars still linger. For a moment, I press my eye to the glass and let the cold metal frame the universe in a tiny circle. The sight is simple enough, a few dim stars shivering in the coming light, but somehow it feels like proof that something vast and patient hums just beyond what I can name. The telescope is old, the lens is a little scratched, the stand slightly wobbly, yet it never fails to remind me how small I am and how much I can still hold in my mind all at once. I think of the photons again, tiny messengers arriving long after they set out, and I imagine my dreams gathering those same particles, weaving them into scenes I'll half remember and half forget by breakfast. Maybe when I dream of flying, it's not my own wish, but the echo of some distant star's last bright gasp. Maybe when I find myself walking through halls that don't exist, I'm tracing the shape of a galaxy that once spun itself into light far from here. I lower the telescope and let my eyes adjust to the soft gray that comes just before sunrise. There's a stillness now that feels almost ceremonial, as if the world is waiting for me to say something to mark this moment, but I have no words that fit. I simply breathe and let my thoughts drift like smoke. I think about how in waking life I hold so tightly to explanations, to cause and effect, to reason. I make lists and plans, I draw lines around what makes sense and what does not. But dreams dissolve those lines so easily, softening the hard edges of the world until anything is possible again. I think this is why we need them, why the mind insists on making its secret movies each night. Without them, we might start to believe too completely in the limits we place on ourselves. In dreams we can be lost without fear, we can find without searching, we can remember things that never happened and forget things that never will. I stand there on the balcony feeling the first brush of sunlight on my face, and I wonder if maybe the real question isn't why we dream, but why we ever wake. What part of us calls us back from that soft, endless place and says, enough, come back, build your day again piece by piece. Maybe waking is a kind of agreement, an unspoken promise that for now we'll put aside the vastness we touch and sleep and focus on the small, the practical, the immediate. And maybe that's all right, because we know when night comes again, the mind will open its secret door and invite us back. I carry the telescope inside and place it gently back on its stand. I make a cup of tea and watch the steam rise in the growing light. I think about how tomorrow or the next night I might dream of this exact moment, but it will be changed, stretched into some new shape. The tea might become an ocean, the balcony a mountain, the stars a city of lights beneath my feet. And when I wake, I'll carry that impossible place inside me, a quiet reminder that not everything needs to be solved or named. Some things are meant only to be felt, to flicker at the edges of thought, and then dissolve like breath on a window. I sip my tea slowly, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Outside, the first birds begin their tentative songs, as if to say the world is ready to begin again. I listen to them, and think about how somewhere beneath the rising sun millions of other people are waking or sleeping or drifting in that gentle place in between. Maybe right now someone else stands at a window, like mine, forehead resting against the glass. I've always found something almost sacred about the moment, when the sun finally climbs above the roofs and spills its early light across my floorboards. It's a thin, fragile light that doesn't yet carry the weight of the noon heat or the sharpness of midday shadows. It feels more like a promise than a command, a soft reassurance that the world is still here, gently unfolding whether or not I'm ready to step into its rhythms. This morning, after sitting by the window and letting the warmth brush my face, I felt an urge to step outside, not far, just to the small garden at the back of the building. There's nothing remarkable there, just a patch of grass, a few stubborn weeds, and a wooden bench that creaks under my weight, but in that quiet hour it feels like a hidden piece of the universe that belongs only to me. I walked out barefoot, feeling the cool dew on my soles, a small shock that reminded me I was alive, awake, and yet not so far from dreaming still. Sometimes, when I stand there surrounded by the gentle murmur of leaves, I wonder if the mind recognizes this return to simple things, the bare contact of skin on earth, the scent of damp soil, the hush of early birds stirring invisible in the branches. Maybe this too is part of why we dream, a way for the mind to remind us of connections we forget during our hurried days, that we are not separate but folded into something larger, more patient, more forgiving than we allow ourselves to believe. I sat on the bench and closed my eyes, letting the breeze move across my face, as if it might carry away the last stubborn pieces of sleep that clung to my thoughts. Behind my eyelids, I could almost see again the shapes of last night's dreams, the way they drifted in pieces through my mind, like pale fish flickering just out of reach. There was a hallway, I remember, that seemed to stretch longer the more I walked it, lined with doors that opened into rooms filled with soft golden light. No voices, no faces, just a quiet sense that each door held something precious, a memory, or a question, or perhaps a piece of myself I hadn't met yet. In the waking light, that image feels both clear and slippery, as if trying too hard to grasp it might make it dissolve completely. So I sit and let it hover just at the edge of awareness, a small gift I do not need to unwrap. A bee drifts close to my arm, pausing for a heartbeat before continuing its lazy spiral around the garden. I watch it move from dandelion to dandelion, its small purpose so complete, so unquestioned. It makes me wonder if creatures like this dream, if in the warm hum of the hive 1,000 tiny minds drift together into a single shared vision of flowers endless and bright. Or maybe their dreams, if they have them, are simpler still, just the echo of the day replayed in flickers of scent and warmth, a quiet reminder to return again tomorrow and begin the soft work once more. I shift on the bench, feeling the wood creak, a soft chorus that matches the slow waking of the world around me. Somewhere a car starts its engine, a door clicks shut, a distant dog barks twice, then falls silent. Each sound is like a stone dropped into the calm pool of morning, sending ripples that gently remind me I am here now, part of this moment. It is easy to forget this during the day, when the hours stack themselves like bricks, and the mind bends under the weight of small tasks and expectations. But here on this bench, with my feet damp from the grass, I remember how thin the line can be between dreaming and waking, how often we carry fragments of one into the other without even noticing. Perhaps that is the secret we ignore, that the mind is not two separate rooms, but a single open field where thoughts drift in and out, weaving fences that never truly hold. I think back to a book I once read about the first humans who looked up at the stars, and wondered not just what they were, but what they meant. Long before telescopes and equations, people must have stared at the night sky and seen not cold distant suns, but stories, pathways to other worlds, reflections of their own fears and hopes. In that way, dreaming is nothing new. It is the same old instinct repainted each night across the soft walls of the skull. We lie down, we close our eyes, and we become again the first stargazers, pointing our inner telescopes toward constellations only we can name. The thought comforts me even as the morning grows brighter, because it means we are never as alone as we think. Even in our most private dreams, we are echoing an ancient habit, a quiet courage to step beyond what we can touch and trust that something waits for us there. I open my eyes to find the garden bathed in gold, the sun climbing higher, the shadows shortening. A spider's web glitters between two slender branches, its pattern flawless and trembling with tiny beads of dew. I wonder if the spider dreams of its web before it spins it, if the shape exists first in some hidden corner of its mind before it becomes silk and air. Maybe that is what we do too, spinning our unseen threads into the dark, hoping they catch something soft enough to hold us as we sleep. I stand and stretch, feeling my back pop in 3 satisfying places. I carry the damp of the grass back inside, leaving small footprints on the kitchen tile that will vanish long before noon. I put the kettle on and lean against the counter, listening to the gentle sigh of the flame, the faint tick of metal expanding as the water heats. I think about the day waiting for me outside the garden, the small list of things to do, the voices to answer, the quiet burdens that settle on shoulders unnoticed. And yet beneath all that I carry a secret warmth, the knowledge that when night comes I will return to that other garden inside my mind, the one where doors line endless hallways and bees drift lazily from thought to thought. Maybe that is all the answer I need for now. Not why we dream, but that we do, and that in dreaming we remind ourselves how to wander, how to soften, how to remember the world is larger, gentler, more mysterious than we allow ourselves to admit when we stand fully awake. The kettle whistles softly, breaking my drift, and I pour the water over a small bag of tea, watching the leaves unfurl in the steam. I cradle the cup between my palms, breathing in the earthy warmth, and let my eyes rest on the window, where the garden glows just beyond the glass. For a moment, I imagine it still there, waiting patient as ever for me to return whenever I close my eyes. A small hidden place woven from memory and wonder, and the quiet unspoken promise that as long as we dream, we will never be completely lost. There is a certain hour in the evening when the world feels as if it is leaning gently towards sleep, but has not yet surrendered to it. The sky turns the color of cooled embers, and the wind loses its edge, becoming something softer that slips through open windows and carries with it the scent of dusk, settling over rooftops and gardens and quiet streets. I find myself drawn to the balcony again, where I can watch the last traces of daylight fade without any rush to fill the coming dark with light. There is something sacred in resisting the instinct to switch on a lamp too soon, as if by sitting in the dim, I can listen more closely to the conversation between the day and the night. From here, I can see the outlines of other windows scattered like soft lanterns, some still lit, others already darkened behind drawn curtains. I imagine the lives behind those windows, tiny flickers of routine and surprise, someone washing dishes, another reading with a cat curled on their lap, a child pretending to sleep, but secretly whispering stories to the ceiling. All these unseen moments unfolding in gentle parallel to my own, reminding me how many dreams are already gathering in hidden corners of the neighborhood, waiting for their owners to come find them. I lean forward, resting my elbows on the railing, feeling the metal cool under my skin, and I think about how often we forget that darkness is not an absence, but a cradle. In this cradle we lay down our thoughts, letting them slip, their daytime costumes, to become something softer, stranger, more honest. Maybe that is why the first moments of dreaming feel so delicate, a kind of surrender we rarely allow ourselves when the sun is up and the clocks are loud. I wonder about the dreams already taking shape behind those windows, drifting into rooms where the mind has permission to build its impossible bridges and secret doorways. Perhaps someone a street over is dreaming of an ocean that folds into itself like silk, or of an old friend whose name they cannot quite remember, but whose presence feels as real as the night air. There is comfort in knowing that even as I stand here awake, part of me is already halfway there, too ready to follow when my eyes grow heavy enough to close. I pull my sweater tighter around my shoulders, feeling the last warmth of the day caught in its fibers. Somewhere below, a neighbor's dog barks once, twice, then settles into silence, as if reminded there is nothing left to guard against now that darkness has taken its gentle place. A moth flutters close to the balcony light, drawn by its soft promise of warmth, or perhaps by some ancient instinct that even the smallest flicker in the dark is worth chasing. I watch its fragile wings beat against the bulb, then drift away into the shadows, and I think about how the mind does the same, circling tiny points of wonder that glow just enough to lure us deeper into the sleeping world. I step back inside, leaving the balcony door open just enough to let the night breathe into the room. The floorboards creak under my bare feet, a familiar sound that feels like a companion rather than an intrusion. I move through the dim apartment, guided more by memory than sight, tracing a path I could walk blindfolded. Each piece of furniture holds a story, each quiet object a reminder that even our waking world is stitched together by countless small dreams. The lamp bought on a whim, the chair passed down from a grandmother whose voice sometimes visits me in dreams, though I never quite catch what she says. I pour a glass of water and carry it to the armchair by the window, where I can watch the stars begin to prick holes in the fabric of the sky. I sip slowly, letting the coolness remind me I am still here on this side of sleep for now. I think about how easy it is to take for granted that we close our eyes each night and trust the world to hold itself together while we wander somewhere else entirely. The trust is remarkable when you pause to see it clearly, this willingness to lie down in darkness and allow the mind to loosen its grip, to hand the reins over to something older, quieter, perhaps wiser than the conscious self we polish and present each day. In the hush of this room, I wonder if perhaps the true purpose of dreaming is not escape but reunion. A reunion with the hidden pieces of ourselves that cannot find a voice in daylight, the buried memories, the questions we do not dare to ask, the tiny hopes we tuck away between obligations. Dreams unfold these parts like old letters found in the back of a drawer, reminding us that we are always more than the roles we play when the sun is up. I tilt my head back, resting it against the cushion, and let my gaze drift to where the ceiling fades into shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a train hums its low, steady promise across the city tracks, a lullaby for strangers moving through the dark. I like to imagine the passengers leaning against cold windows, eyes closed, heads nodding in rhythm to the rails, their minds slipping gently between here and elsewhere. Maybe in those moments the train becomes a corridor between worlds, carrying its sleeping cargo through a landscape that is part steel and part stardust. I finish my water and place the empty glass on the table beside me, my fingers tracing the condensation left behind a tiny map that will vanish long before I wake. I close my eyes for just a moment to test the weight of sleep pressing against the edges of my thoughts. Images flicker behind my lids, a hallway lined with mirrors, a door that opens onto a field of snow, a single tree standing alone yet not lonely. I do not chase these visions, I let them drift, trusting they will find me again when the time is right. Instead, I open my eyes once more to the room, quiet and patient around me. I stand, stretch, and move to the bedroom, where the blankets wait folded back like an invitation. I pause at the doorway, looking back at the faint shape of my living room, bathed now only in the thin light of the street lamp outside. There is something beautiful in this moment between moving and resting, between holding the day and setting it down. I slip under the covers, feeling the softness gather around me like an old friend. My thoughts begin to blur at the edges, stretching out toward that familiar horizon where logic bends and questions soften into symbols. I think about the stars I watched tonight, the moth's wings, the hush that grows deeper with each breath. I think about the other windows, the other dreamers, the shared cradle of this hour. And as my eyelids grow heavy, I hold one last thought close, like a lantern in my chest, the gentle truth that no matter how far I drift, I am never truly lost in the dark. There is always this return, this quiet promise that the dreaming mind will carry me gently, cradle me in its shifting. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night for no reason at all, or at least no reason I can name. There is a hush that sits on my chest when I find myself lying there, eyes open in the dark, listening for some sound that might explain why my mind tugged me back from wherever I was drifting. But the house is still, the walls breathe their slow night breath, the pipes whisper soft echoes of water long settled, the wind taps politely at the window and moves on. I lie there blinking at the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns with my eyes, as if the darkness were canvas enough for thought. I have come to think these small hours are not interruptions, but invitations, quiet doorways that open when the mind needs space to stretch itself beyond the neat edges of sleep. It feels different from dreaming, not the vivid cinema of stories and impossible scenes, but something closer to standing on the shore of a wide, silent ocean under a sky that remembers every star that has ever burned. Sometimes I remember dreams in these moments, or pieces of them, as if they waited just behind the curtain of my waking mind and only stepped forward when the world was quiet enough to let them pass through. Tonight it is a dream from my childhood that finds me, one I have not thought of in years, yet here it is, gentle and insistent, a visitor asking to be let in. I see myself standing in the backyard of the house we lived in before the paint began to peel and the trees outgrew the fence. I am small, barefoot, the grass cool and damp under my feet. The sky above me is too big to hold all at once, but I try anyway, tipping my head back until the stars blur and swim in my vision. There is no story to this dream, only a feeling, a soft certainty that the sky and I are part of the same thing, stitched together by the thin silver thread of my breath rising into that endless dark. When I wake fully, I lie there wondering why my mind chose this fragment to bring me tonight. Maybe it is nothing more than a random flicker of memory, but I like to believe there is always a reason, even if I am too drowsy to find it. Perhaps the mind brings back these small, forgotten moments to remind us who we have been and who we still are, deep beneath the layers we build around ourselves each day. I shift under the blanket, feeling its familiar weight, a gentle tether that keeps me from drifting too far. I turn on my side, facing the window, where the night presses its cool face to the glass. Beyond that pane, I know the city is sleeping, or pretending to sleep, its lights scattered like dropped coins on dark streets. Somewhere an owl calls once, twice, then falls silent, a sound so clean and certain it cuts through the soft clutter of my thoughts. I close my eyes again and find that the memory lingers just beneath the surface, like the taste of a word I cannot quite speak. I wonder if the child I was would recognize me now, this older version, who lies awake asking the same questions in slightly different shapes. Maybe that is what dreams do best, they slip beneath our grown logic and remind us of the threads that never truly break, no matter how many mornings we stand in front of mirrors trying to be someone slightly better, slightly more prepared, slightly less afraid. I breathe slowly, counting the seconds it takes for my ribs to rise and fall, as if each breath might carry me a little closer to sleep again. But I do not rush it. There is a sweetness in these in-between moments, when the mind is too tired to pretend, too alert to disappear entirely. Thoughts drift in like visitors at a station waiting for the next train to somewhere else. I think about how many nights like this must unfold in houses I will never see. How many people lie awake staring at their own ceilings, wondering if the dreams they half remember mean anything at all, or if meaning is just another word for wanting to feel less alone in the dark. I imagine a city of sleepers, each mind casting its net into the quiet ocean, hoping to pull back something shimmering enough to hold on to come morning. A dream of an old friend, a dream of a place that never existed yet feels more familiar than any street they have walked while awake. I think of all these quiet minds humming in the dark, like small lanterns, each flickering in its own rhythm, yet part of something larger, a constellation that only the night can see whole. My eyes drift open again, and I watch as the first thin hint of dawn begins to tease the edge of the window glass. It is not light exactly, more like the ghost of light, a promise that soon the sky will shift its colors, and the world will begin its slow daily choreography. I know I should close my eyes, that sleep will come if I let it, if I trust the mind to fold me back into that secret place where the hours slip by without asking for anything in return. But I stay awake just a little longer, wanting to hold this hush before the day demands its small certainties. I think about how in a few hours I will wake fully, the sun climbing the walls, the kettle humming, the keys and shoes and lists waiting where I left them. And yet all of that feels softer now, knowing this hidden hour lives inside it too, a reminder that we are never just the selves we polish and present, but also the drifting selves who wander hallways of memory and fields of starlight when no one is watching. I think perhaps this is why we dream, not to escape but to return to a place that asks nothing of us but our quiet attention. A place where we are allowed to forget our names, our calendars, our stubborn fears, and become again the barefoot child tipping their head back to swallow the stars. I turn onto my back, feeling the mattress creak its quiet complaint, and I listen for the owl, but it does not call again. The city holds its breath, waiting for the sun to crest the horizon, waiting for engines and footsteps and voices to fill the empty spaces. I close my eyes, and this time I let them stay closed, trusting that the dream I left will find me again, or if not, that another will come soft as the first light spilling through my window. In that last moment before sleep folds me under, I feel the hush settle back over my chest, the familiar weight of darkness, not heavy, but tender, like an old blanket drawn up to the chin of a child, who knows that even the vast sky is not too much to hold, when the mind is willing to drift, and the heart is willing to trust that what we find in dreams is never truly lost. When morning finally comes, it does not arrive with any loud announcement or sudden burst of certainty, but rather with a gentle seep of pale light that finds its way through the thin curtains, pooling across the floorboards like a careful secret. I wake slowly, as if my mind is reluctant to climb fully out of whatever soft depths it had drifted through in the hours before. There is a warmth still lingering in my blanket, and I draw it closer for a moment longer, pretending that I might stay there all day, drifting on the gentle edge of half sleep and half waking. But the day has its quiet gravity, and soon enough I swing my legs over the side of the bed, and feel the cold floor remind me where I am and when. The kettle hums in the kitchen, a small faithful sound that makes me think of all the mornings that have come before this one, each carrying its own weather, its own quiet invitations. I stand by the window while the water boils, watching how the early sun tries to coax color back into the shapes of my street. There is the neighbor's old car parked slightly crooked against the curb, the tree just beginning to whisper its leaves in the breeze, the small cracks in the sidewalk that someone once tried to fill with bright chalk but the rain has since washed away. It is a plain view, but there is something soft in its ordinariness, something that feels like a gentle reminder that life does not need to shout to be felt deeply. The kettle clicks off, and I pour my tea, watching the steam rise and curl around itself before dissolving into the morning air. I hold the cup close, not because I need it yet, but because there is something comforting in its warmth against my palm, something that feels almost like the lingering ghost of a dream that has not fully decided to let me go. As I sip, I find myself thinking of the night's drift, the way my mind seemed to float between old memories and impossible landscapes, each one stitched together by some logic that makes sense only when the eyes are closed. I try to piece together the fragments left behind, a hallway lined with framed photographs that changed each time I looked at them, a voice humming a tune I could almost name, a doorway that led to a garden under a sky brighter than any night sky has the right to be. None of it clear enough to grasp, but clear enough to remind me that some part of me is always wandering, even when I stand here in the quiet plainness of morning tea. I think of how the mind insists on returning to these secret places each night, as if it were trying to remind itself of something too big to say out loud during the noise of day. Perhaps dreams are not messages to be solved, but small rehearsals in remembering how to wonder, how to ask without needing an answer, how to stand at the edge of what is known and feel no fear when the rest falls away. I carry my tea to the small table by the window and sit watching as the street begins its slow gathering of movement. A jogger passes, head bowed against the wind. A delivery van hums its steady promise down the block. Someone laughs behind a closing door, and then the sound is gone as quickly as it came. Each small movement feels like a line in a poem, written not with words, but with the simple fact of people being here, breathing, moving, stepping forward into whatever the day asks of them. I find it strangely beautiful how easily we drift from the soft landscapes of dreaming to these ordinary streets, how naturally we set aside impossible flights of the mind to tie shoes and lock doors and check lists that never seem to end. Maybe the wonder is not that we dream, but that we wake at all, that we find it in ourselves to believe in the sturdy shape of reality after spending hours dissolving its edges. I run my finger along the rim of the cup, feeling its warmth begin to fade, and I think about what it would be like if we could carry the softness of dreams more fully into our waking hours, if we let the impossible stay just a little longer before we asked it to make sense. I imagine what it might feel like to stand in the middle of an ordinary street, yet still see the hidden doorways and secret hallways tucked behind the brick and glass. Perhaps we do this more than we know. Perhaps each passing thought, each small distraction is the mind tugging at the edge of its curtain, showing us a glimpse of how wide and wild it really is when we stop pretending that every question must lead to an answer. I finish my tea and rinse the cup, the warm water running over my hands, grounding me again in this small ritual that repeats itself so many mornings that it almost becomes invisible. I leave the window open just a crack to let the breeze wander through the rooms, carrying with it the scent of waking life mixed with the faint memory of the night's drifting. I move through the apartment, straightening a book here, picking up a sock. They're small gestures that feel like a way of saying, yes, I am here, I am awake, I am part of this day, even as some piece of me still stands barefoot in that impossible garden where the stars bend low enough to touch. By the time I slip on my shoes and step outside, the sun has climbed just high enough to soften the sharp edges of the buildings, casting long shadows that will shorten as the day grows more certain of itself. I walk slowly, letting my steps find their own quiet rhythm on the pavement. There is no hurry, not yet. The world seems willing to wait a moment longer before asking for anything more demanding than my simple presence. I pass a neighbor's yard where last night's rain still clings to the tips of grass, each droplet a tiny lens holding the upside-down sky. I pause to watch how the morning light catches these small prisms, turning the ordinary green into something that feels almost holy for a heartbeat. And then I walk on, carrying the glimpse with me like a hidden note in my pocket, something I might unfold later when the day grows too loud and I need a reminder that there is always wonder waiting at the edges if I know where to look. I find myself wandering toward the small park at the end of the street, a patch of green caught between rows of brick houses and narrow roads. It is not much, but it is enough a small pocket where the city's hum softens, and the mind can remember how to breathe without the tight grip of clocks and plans. I sit on a bench under a tree whose branches sway gently overhead, whispering secrets in a language I will never fully understand, yet always feel as if I once did. Here in this quiet place, I close my eyes for a moment and let the sun warm my face, and I think about the dream from the night before, how it clings like a faint scent of something sweet and impossible. I know it will fade as the hours pass, replaced by the sharp certainty of tasks and errands, but for now it lingers, reminding me that there is a door always waiting just beyond the edges of thought. And when night comes again, when I slip back under the blanket and the world tilts once more toward darkness, I will find that door waiting, its handle cool under my dreaming hand, ready to open into whatever wonder my mind has saved for me next. The park in the morning feels like a secret that belongs to no one and everyone at once. I sit on the bench under the patient tree and watch how the shadows shift with each small gust of wind. The branches move like slow dancers, tracing patterns on the grass that appear and vanish before they can be named. A few birds hop near my feet, pecking at the earth with that single-minded devotion that makes me wonder if their days feel as long to them as ours sometimes do. I close my eyes for a moment and listen to the layered quiet that lives here beneath the hum of distant traffic, the faint echo of a passing train, the muted laughter of a child chasing a runaway ball across the path. There is something deeply comforting in this soft chorus of life unfolding around me without demand or expectation. I find myself drifting a little, not quite asleep, but not entirely anchored to the bench either. It makes me think of how dreams often arrive when we are not asking for them, how they slip through the cracks we leave open when our minds grow tired of holding everything together so neatly. I remember reading once that when we dream, our brains are not resting at all, but lighting up in wild, intricate patterns, more active in some ways than when we are awake. It seemed strange at first that the mind would work so hard when the body lies still, but maybe that is its true work, not just to solve the puzzles of our waking life, but to remind us how vast and fluid we really are beneath the surface of all our careful plans. The breeze picks up again, carrying with it the smell of cut grass and something faintly floral that I cannot quite place. It makes me think of a dream I had months ago, where I was standing in a field of flowers taller than my head, the petals brushing my shoulders as I walked through them in slow circles. There was no path, no destination, just the soft weight of blossoms against my skin and the distant echo of laughter from someone I never saw but somehow knew I trusted. When I woke that morning, I carried the field with me all through the day, an invisible garden that opened again each time I closed my eyes for a second longer than usual. Even now, sitting here, I can almost feel that same softness around my shoulders, as if the memory lives not just in my head, but somewhere deeper in my bones, waiting to remind me that not everything beautiful needs a purpose. I watched the birds lift away one by one, startled by a passing jogger whose feet tap out a quick, polite rhythm on the path. He nods at me as he passes, and I nod back, and for a moment it feels like we are both part of some quiet agreement to let the morning remain simple and unsolved. I wonder if he will carry this small moment with him, or if it will slip away beneath the layers of whatever comes next, meeting screens, traffic lights, the slow drift toward another night, when his mind will slip its leash and run again through places no map can find. Maybe somewhere in that dream, he will pass me again, sitting on this same bench under this same tree, nodding once more in gentle recognition of the soft secret we share. The sun climbs higher, warming the crown of my head and painting the bench slats with lines of light and shadow that flicker when I shift my weight. I can feel the heat sink into my shoulders, loosening the small knots I did not know I carried there. It occurs to me how often we hold tight to tension that has no clear origin, how the mind gathers worries, like twigs for a nest we never finish building. Perhaps dreams come to scatter those twigs for a while to remind us that we do not need to carry every piece of our waking life so carefully knotted to our ribs. I lean back and watch a single cloud drift lazily across the open patch of sky above the branches. Its edges shift and fold into themselves so slowly that it feels like watching a thought form and dissolve before it can be spoken. I wonder if the mind does something similar when it dreams, shaping and reshaping feelings and memories into patterns that do not need to hold their shape once morning returns. Maybe that is why so many dreams slip away so quickly, why we wake with only a handful of images pressed like dried flowers between the pages of our minds. It is not loss exactly, but a gentle letting go, a reminder that not all beauty is meant to last in the same form. A soft breeze brushes my cheek, and I imagine it carries with it a whisper from whatever part of me still wanders through that endless hallway of sleep. I like to think there is a version of myself who never quite leaves that place, who lingers in the corners of my dreams, tending secret gardens, sweeping vast echoing corridors, dusting off forgotten doors that open to fields or oceans or quiet rooms lit by a single candle. Perhaps when I drift into sleep each night, it is not a journey outward, but a homecoming to that hidden self who waits with a patient smile and an open hand ready to guide me through the soft dark. A child's voice calls out somewhere behind me, and I turn to see a small figure running toward the swings trailed by an adult whose steps are slow and careful, a half smile already blooming on their face. I watch them for a while, the easy grace with which the child climbs into the seat, the way they lean back, fearless, trusting the chains to hold, as they arc forward into the waiting air. It reminds me of how dreams often feel when they lift us away from gravity, when we find ourselves flying over cities we have never seen or diving beneath oceans we have never touched. The body stays behind, resting steady and warm, but the mind soars untethered, learning again what it means to trust the invisible. The child laughs, a sound so clear it cuts through the hum of traffic and bird call and wind, as if reminding everyone within earshot that some joys do not need explaining. I find myself smiling too, the kind that starts small at the corners of the mouth and grows until it softens something tight behind the eyes. Maybe that is what I want to carry into the coming night, this simple note that there is still so much we do not need to solve, so much wonder that asks nothing more than to be witnessed. When the sun dips low again, when I slip between sheets that have gathered the warmth of the day, I will remember this park, this bench, this small hush of morning wrapped in birdsong and children's laughter. I will let my mind drift back to that field of impossible flowers, or forward into some new dream yet unnamed. And when I wake, I hope I will remember again how the edges blur, how the door always waits unlocked, how the self that dreams and the self that wakes are never so far apart as we sometimes pretend. I leave the park when the sun has fully claimed the morning, and the air hums with the quiet energy of a day stretching its limbs. The street feels warmer beneath my shoes than it did when I first walked this way, as if the earth itself is waking up alongside all of us, finding its breath in the small tremors of wind that lift the leaves and carry a chorus of distant voices. I think about how simple it is to step from one world into another without noticing the line you've crossed. One moment you are sitting on a bench dreaming awake, the next you are just another person moving down a sidewalk, mind occupied by the gentle pull of errands and passing thoughts. But somewhere underneath that surface something softer lingers, like a half-finished sentence waiting to be spoken again when the world grows quiet. I stop at the corner where the small grocery store sits, its front window crowded with oranges and bunches of herbs in metal buckets. I step inside, and the shift from warm sun to cool air is like dipping into a quiet stream. The hum of a ceiling fan blends with the soft music playing from an old speaker perched near the bread shelf. I pick up a basket more out of habit than need, tracing my fingers along the familiar edge. I drift through the aisles, slowly touching labels, reading the names of things I've bought 100 times before, as if they might offer up some hidden message if I only look closely enough. There is something about these small rituals that feels like the waking mind's way of holding the world steady, arranging it in neat lines and rows, so that when night comes again, there is a shape to slip free from. I choose a handful of things I do not truly need: a loaf of bread, an apple, a small jar of honey, and at the last moment a bunch of fresh mint whose green leaves promise a sharp sweetness when I tear them open at home. I wait at the counter behind a woman with a soft, tired smile, who tells the cashier about her garden, how the tomatoes have finally begun to ripen, how she hopes the rain will hold off for just a few more days. I listen without meaning to, catching the gentle rise and fall of her voice, the way the cashier nods and adds his own quiet details, as if these small exchanges are as necessary as anything they will carry home in paper bags. When it is my turn, we trade the usual words, and he wraps my mint in a scrap of brown paper, tucking it neatly at the top of my bag. I thank him and step back into the street, blinking against the new brightness. As I walk home, I catch the scent of the mint rising through the paper, clean and bright like a promise. It makes me think of how certain smells can slip past every waking defense and call something hidden to the surface. A scent of cut grass, and I am 12 again, sprawled beneath the wide arms of an oak tree, while clouds parade lazily overhead. The smell of wood smoke, and I am standing in a cabin on the edge of a frozen lake, my breath mingling with the white plume of steam rising from a chipped mug. These small sudden doors open without asking permission, carrying me back to moments I did not know I had saved. I wonder if this is how dreams work too, calling up the buried fragments, stitching them together in ways that make no sense to logic, but feel perfectly true while we drift inside them. Maybe we never lose anything entirely. Maybe every moment waits in the soft folds of the mind until the right scent or sound or slip of light invites it back to the surface. I reach my building and climb the stairs, slowly feeling the weight of the small bag shift against my hip. At the door, I pause for a heartbeat before turning the key, as if part of me expects to find the world changed on the other side of the wood. But it is the same familiar space that greets me, the same hush that waits patiently for my footsteps to scatter it. I set the bag down on the counter and wash my hands, listening to the rush of water and the low sigh of pipes behind the walls. I tear a few leaves of mint and press them to my nose, breathing in their bright, cool scent, letting it settle somewhere behind my eyes where tonight's dreams might find it, and carry it forward into some green hallway or garden that does not yet exist. I slice the bread and spread a thin layer of honey, watching how it catches the late morning light and glows like amber. There is something so tender in these small tasks that do not ask for more than my quiet attention. I sit by the window again, plate balanced on my knee, and take small, careful bites, tasting each piece as if I might find a secret hidden in the sweetness. The street outside is busier now, a parade of footsteps, voices, the occasional distant bark of a dog who wants nothing more than to remind the world he is here too. I wonder how many dreams are already waiting in these passers-by, tucked in the corners of their pockets or resting just beneath the surface of their practiced smiles. Maybe someone walking past my window carries a memory they cannot name, a fragment of a dream that still clings to their collarbone, the echo of a voice that once told them something too soft to speak aloud. It comforts me to think that we move through our days trailing invisible threads behind us, threads that weave and tangle, and sometimes catch on the same branch of a passing thought. Perhaps in this quiet, hidden way, we are never truly separate, even when we feel most alone. I finish my bread and brush the crumbs into my palm, careful not to drop any on the floor, as if each small piece deserves to be carried gently back to the sink. I rinse the plate and watch the sunlight shift across the counter, inching its way toward afternoon. There is still so much day left, yet I find myself thinking already of the night, of how I will slip beneath the blanket and close my eyes, trusting once more that the mind will do what it must. Maybe it will carry me back to that oak tree, or the cabin, or the field of tall flowers. Maybe it will open a door I have never seen before, one that leads me into some bright, impossible room filled with voices I do not know, but somehow understand. I do not need to solve it now, do not need to pull apart the whys and hows and hidden meanings. It is enough to know that the dreaming self waits patient and unhurried, that it will greet me when I arrive with the same quiet certainty that no question ever goes unanswered in the language of sleep. The afternoon drifts on, pulling the sun higher, then gently lowering it again. The evening comes on so gently I hardly notice at first how the light outside my window folds itself into softer shades, the sky drifting from the warm gold of afternoon into a pale wash of blue that deepens by the minute. I sit at my small table, fingers wrapped around the cooling mug of tea that I have let sit longer than I meant to. There is something about this hour that makes me want to pause between sips, as if I might catch the precise moment when day gives itself over to night. The street below grows quieter, the footsteps fewer, the voices low and measured, like secrets passed between shadows. I watch the windows across from mine flicker awake one by one, small squares of yellow that remind me how many stories are held inside these walls, stories that will never touch my own in any direct way, yet still feel connected by this soft web of light. Sometimes, when I watch the windows glow, I wonder how many people behind them are preparing themselves for sleep without realizing it, how many are already drifting toward that hidden door, their minds loosening their grip on the day's demands. It comforts me in a way to think of it not as solitude, but as a gathering, a silent agreement that when the sun dips low, we each surrender our waking shapes to the tender strangeness that waits behind closed eyes. I stand and stretch, letting the last warmth of the tea slip from my palms as I wash the cup. The water runs over my fingers, cool and quick, and I wonder for a fleeting moment if somewhere in my mind this small detail will be tucked away, carried forward into a dream that is yet to bloom. Perhaps I will find myself standing at a river, feeling this same clear rush around my wrists, or holding my hands out to catch a sudden rain that feels familiar for reasons I cannot name. These thoughts come and go without urgency, like leaves drifting past a window, not asking to be held, only to be noticed. I switch off the kitchen light and walk through the rooms that hold the quiet shape of my day, books left half open, a blanket folded neatly over the arm of the chair, a single shoe nudged just out of line with its pair. Each object seems to hum with the faint echo of my passing, as if the walls themselves remember more of me than I can carry at once. I pause at the window again, resting my forehead lightly against the cool glass. The sky has deepened to that particular shade of blue that feels both endless and close enough to touch, a blue that promises the first shy stars will reveal themselves if I wait patiently enough. I breathe out a small fog against the pane, watch it fade, watch my reflection hover there for a moment, then blur back into the shadows. I have always been fascinated by this hour when the mind begins to soften its grip, when the boundary between what is here and what is imagined grows thin enough to let the two lean against each other like old friends who have always shared secrets. I step away and move to my room, pulling back the blanket, smoothing the pillow with a kind of quiet reverence, as if preparing a small boat for a night's gentle voyage. There is comfort in these small motions, these repeated gestures that ask nothing more of me than to be present for their simplicity. I change into soft clothes, feeling the days slip from my shoulders with each familiar movement. In the hush, I hear the first song of the night wind tapping gently at the window's edge, carrying with it the scent of earth and stone, and something faintly green, as if the garden I left behind this morning has followed me home in pieces of air. I sit on the edge of the bed for a while, not quite ready to lie down, letting my thoughts wander where they will. I think of the mint leaves now pressed into the tea's warmth, the bread's sweetness, the laughter of the child on the swing, the old woman's tomatoes waiting for rain. I think of the faces I do not know passing under my window, trailing their dreams, like silk ribbons caught in the hush between footsteps. Each small piece folds itself gently into the soft archive my mind keeps hidden somewhere behind my waking voice. I know when sleep comes it will sift through these pieces, turning them over and over, shaping them into something I could never plan or expect. This is what I love most about dreams, how they do not ask permission, how they arrive with their own quiet logic, weaving memories and moments and impossible colors into shapes that defy the plain angles of day. They remind me that no matter how carefully I stack the hours, I am always more than what I carry in my pockets or pin to my calendar. I lie back against the pillow, feeling its familiar coolness against my cheek, listening to the night breathe its soft promise through the open crack of the window. Somewhere outside a car passes slow and low, its tires humming against the street, a sound that feels almost like an old song heard from the next room. I close my eyes and let my thoughts slip, their tight knots drifting out past the neat edges of the day. I see a hallway lined with mirrors, but each reflection is slightly blurred, not quite me, but not entirely someone else either. I see a garden that grows beneath a sky the color of deep water, its flowers opening and closing like slow heartbeat pulses of light. I see a door at the end of a path that curves away just before I reach it, not to keep me out, but to remind me there is always more to find if I am willing to follow. In this drifting, I feel the small gravity of sleep gather around my ribs, not heavy, but soft like a blanket settling itself without effort or announcement. I think again about how we spend our waking hours trying so hard to make sense of things, drawing lines around our thoughts, naming each corner and corridor until it feels safe enough to stand in. But in dreams we stand in spaces that have no corners, no straight lines, only curves and open fields and staircases that climb into the soft dark of the sky. In dreams we remember what the waking mind too often forgets, that we are not built of edges, but of open doors and turning keys and the quiet echo of footsteps leading us deeper into ourselves. I let that truth find me here in the hush, my breath slowing to match the night's own rhythm. There is no need to chase it, no need to clutch at the images that come and go like fireflies drifting through a summer yard. I think maybe this is what it means to trust that the mind will carry me where I need to go, whether back to an old oak tree or forward into some field of stars I have never seen yet, somehow know. My eyelids grow heavy, my limbs settle into the slow drift of sleep's tide, and somewhere just beyond the reach of my next thought, I feel the first door open, the soft turning of a key, the gentle hush that says, yes, come in, there is so much yet to see. In the dream, I find myself standing at the edge of a lake so still it holds the sky like a mirror, and for a moment I cannot tell where water ends and air begins. There is a hush here that feels older than the trees gathered at the shore, a hush that settles in my chest and quiets the usual hum of questions. The surface of the lake shifts with the smallest breath of wind, and when I kneel down to touch it, my fingers do not come away wet, but instead pass through as if dipping into a memory made of light and warmth. I do not wonder what this means. I do not search for signs or symbols. I simply watch how the ripples spread out in perfect circles, each one carrying a piece of me farther than I can follow. There is a tree at my back, its trunk wide and rough against my palm, its branches reaching so far above me that they seem to pull stars down into their leaves. Somewhere beyond the tree's patient shadow, I hear laughter, soft and fleeting like a child's voice carried across water, and I think perhaps this dream is not entirely mine, but borrowed, stitched together from pieces of other nights, other minds. I sit at the shore for what feels like hours, or maybe only moments. Time here stretches and folds like silk, and I am content to let it do as it pleases. I watch as small shapes drift just beneath the surface, silver flashes that might be fish or might be thoughts not yet formed. I lean closer and see my own reflection looking back, not quite as I know myself, but softer somehow, eyes wide with a kind of trust one do not always carry when awake. The reflected sky behind that face is wider, too endless, in a way that makes my ribs loosen, as if they too remember they were never meant to cage so much wanting. I close my eyes and breathe the cool air deep into my chest, and when I open them again, the lake is gone, replaced by a field that rolls away in gentle hills of tall grass that catch the moonlight and hold it like secrets. I stand and walk through the grass, letting the stalks brush against my hands and legs, feeling the small electric shiver each touch leaves behind. There is no path yet. I do not feel lost. The field seems to open where I need it to, parting and folding back into itself, as if it knows where I am going even when I do not. I come to a small rise, and when I reach the top I see a house below, a shape I almost recognize, though I know I have never seen it before. Its windows glow with a soft warm light, and as I approach I feel the gentle pull in my chest, the one that says this is not a place, but a memory given shape for a little while. The door is ajar, and when I push it open the hinges sigh like old in winter. Inside, the rooms are quiet yet filled with a sense of waiting. There are chairs gathered around a small table, and on the table sits a single cup steaming, though there is no fire in the hearth, no sound of a kettle, no sign of who might have placed it there. I stand by the table and feel the warmth of the cup against my fingertips without lifting it, wondering if perhaps it is meant for me or for someone I have yet to become. I move through the house, touching the walls, the frames of doors, the curve of a stair that winds up and up into shadows that do not feel heavy, but soft like the darkness beneath a blanket on a winter morning. I climb without counting steps, listening for the sound of my own breath, which seems lighter here, as if the air itself helps carry it forward. At the top of the stairs, I find a room that holds no furniture, only a wide window that looks out into a sky filled with stars so bright and close I feel I could reach through the glass and gather them in my hands like handfuls of salt and snow. I stand there for a long time, my palm pressed against the pane, feeling the cold seep into my skin, grounding me in this place that is both inside me and far beyond. The stars shift slowly, as if drifting on some ancient tide, and I imagine I can hear them whispering, though the words are not words, but something deeper, a hum that moves through bone and thought alike. I sit on the floor and lean my back against the wall, watching the sky, watching myself, watching the way my thoughts unspool like threads that knot and tangle and dissolve again. There is no rush here, no sense that I must hold on to any of it tightly, and I think perhaps this is the gift of dreaming, not answers, but the permission to let the questions breathe, to let them live without cages or keys. I think of all the nights I have stood by my window awake tracing the shapes of constellations with my finger against the glass, inventing stories I would forget by morning, yet carry somewhere beneath my ribs, like a small ember that warms the colder parts of waking life. Here in this quiet room above a house that is more memory than place, I feel those stories gather around me, not demanding to be told, but content to hum their gentle truths beneath my heartbeat. When I close my eyes, I see the lake again, the field, the slow drift of clouds that bend the moonlight into soft ribbons. I feel the weight of my own body grow light, the floor beneath me shifting like water, and I know that soon I will wake, though the line between sleep and waking feels thinner now, softer around the edges. I think of the cup on the table cooling in the quiet downstairs, a promise that some part of this place will wait for my return whenever I choose to knock on its door again. I let myself drift farther into the hush, feeling the walls of the house fade, the stars fold themselves back into the wide sky, the grass and lake and laughter settle into the soft dark of my mind's hidden rooms. Somewhere far away my breathing changes, deepens, finds the slow rhythm that will carry me forward into the first touch of morning light. And when that light comes, when I open my eyes to the shape of my own ceiling and the sound of the world waking beyond the window, I know I will carry something of this dream with me, pressed like a hidden leaf between the pages of my day. I will stand by my window with a cup warming my hands and feel the echo of that other cup left waiting in a house that does not exist, yet somehow holds more of me than any map could find. I will watch the sky turn from blue to gold and think of the lake and the field and the stars and the soft hum of questions that do not need to be solved, only honored in the hush before sleep and the gentle drift back to waking. And when night comes again, when I lie down and close my eyes, I will trust the mind to find its own quiet path back to that hidden door, that patient lake, that house of impossible light, ready to remind me once more that we dream not to escape the world, but to find our way deeper into the wonder of being here at all. When I wake, I carry with me the soft weight of that dream, like a folded letter slipped into the pocket of my thoughts, its corners warm against my ribs as I move through the slow, quiet rituals of morning. The kettle sighs its steam winding into the dim kitchen light, and I stand beside it, my palms flat on the cool countertop, listening to the hum of water finding its gentle boil. Outside, the sky is caught between gray and gold, the dawn reluctant yet steady, pressing light against rooftops and window panes, as if reminding the world there is no stopping the steady unspooling of time. I pour my tea and breathe in the warmth, letting it curl around the edge of sleep, still clinging to my shoulders. There is something almost ceremonial in this moment, when the mind is not quite finished dreaming, and the body stands rooted in the small certainties of here and now. I sit by the window, wrapping my fingers around the mug, watching how the light changes the shape of the street below, where a few early risers drift past, bundled in jackets against the cool bite of morning. I wonder if any of them woke from a dream they cannot quite name, if they too carry the echo of some imagined place stitched softly into the lining of their day. Sometimes I think we are more honest in these first moments, before the noise of tasks and clocks and screens gathers its chorus around us. We sit with our tea, our coffee, our slow measured breath, and we remember, if only faintly, that we are creatures who drift nightly through rooms without walls, fields without fences, skies without end. I sip and taste the faint sharpness of mint from the leaves I pressed into my cup last night, the memory of that green breath rising to meet me like a quiet promise that something of the dream remains, not as a story I can retell, but as a feeling I can carry forward. I think of the lake and the field and the small house with its waiting cup, how they feel less like places and more like soft instructions left for me to find when the waking world begins to feel too narrow, too solid. Maybe that is what dreams are at their gentlest, not puzzles to be solved, but doorways we could open from the inside, when the day asks too much of our certainty. I stand and carry my cup to the sink, running warm water over porcelain, and watching how the steam lifts and vanishes against the window's cold glass. In the fading swirl of it, I see for an instant the shifting edge of that mirrored lake, the tall grasses bending beneath moonlight, the soft glow of a window left ajar. I blink, and it is gone, but the hush it leaves behind settles somewhere low in my chest, a reminder that what slips through the mind at night does not vanish, but settles, like silt waiting for the next quiet moment to stir itself awake. I dress slowly, choosing clothes by feel rather than thought, pulling sleeves over wrists still warm from sleep. I slip my shoes on by the door, the laces trailing for a heartbeat before I knot them, with the simple practiced grace of someone who has done this 1,000 times before, each knot a small anchor to the solid world beneath my feet. Stepping outside, I feel the chill catch at my throat, crisp and honest, a clean promise that the day will ask me to stay awake, but will not mind if my mind wanders now and then. The street is brighter now, though the sky still holds its early hush. The trees along the sidewalk shiver gently in a wind that carries the scent of damp earth and the faint memory of last night's rain. I walk without hurry, my steps finding the same soft rhythm I felt in the dream when I moved through the tall field with no path, yet no need for one. The city wakes in layers around me, blinds lifting, doors opening, voices rising in greeting or complaint or quiet ritual. I watch a cat slip across the street, its body low and certain, tail flicking once, as if to say it knows the secret paths that run beneath the noise we build. I pause at a small corner store where the door is propped open by an old stone, and the smell of fresh bread drifts out into the street, wrapping itself around my thoughts like a familiar blanket. I step inside, letting the warmth gather around my shoulders, the soft chatter of two voices behind the counter blending with the low hum of a radio that seems tuned not to any station, but to the steady heartbeat of morning itself. I choose a small loaf still warm enough to steam against the thin paper bag, and as I wait to pay, I wonder what dreams lived in the mind of the baker before dawn found him pulling dough into shapes that will vanish by noon. Maybe he stood at the same mirrored lake, maybe he climbed the same stairs into a room of stars, maybe he woke and felt the same small tug at the edge of his thoughts, telling him there is more than what we measure in hours and currency. I step back into the street with the bread warm in my hands, its scent mingling with the sharp, clean air, and for a moment I stand still, eyes closed, letting the world shift and breathe around me. I know I must walk on, that the day will gather me into its hours and ask me to speak and listen and decide, but for now I hold this hush, this slender invisible thread that tethers me back to that hidden house and its waiting door. I carry the bread home like a small offering to the self that woke with a dream still pressed against my ribs, and when I reach my kitchen, I set it gently on the counter, tearing off a piece to taste the warmth of it, the way it holds a story I cannot quite tell, but trust to unfold when the night comes again. I stand by the window once more, watching how the sun has climbed higher, its light sharper now, outlining the rooftops in crisp lines that will soften again when dusk leans close. I think of how each day asks us to step into its shape, to lift our thoughts like stones and set them down where they are needed, but each night comes to remind us we are also water, we are air, we are the hush that breathes beneath our spoken words. When I finally lie down tonight, when I close my eyes and feel the soft weight of blankets gather around my shoulders, I know I will slip once more through that patient door, my mind carrying the scent of mint, the taste of warm bread, the quiet laughter of stars spilling through branches. I will stand again at the edge of that lake, kneel at its mirrored shore, and feel the hush find me waiting not for answers, but for the simple tender permission to drift and wonder, and wake again, with the gentle certainty that no dream is ever truly lost. I watched the days slip by almost without noticing how the hours bend around ordinary tasks, and soft silences that fill the spaces between each small doing. The bread sits on the counter half gone, wrapped in a clean cloth that smells faintly of the mint I tucked there the other night, to keep it fresh, though perhaps what I really wanted was to carry a trace of the dream back into my waking kitchen. I moved through the room, slowly brushing crumbs from the table, stacking the cups in the sink, straightening the blanket draped over the back of my chair, as if these small motions might anchor me to something solid, even as my thoughts drift in gentle circles around the quiet center of my chest. I find myself standing at the window more than once, eyes tracing the way light spills across the street, the soft sway of tree branches in a breeze that carries no urgency, only the faint promise of change. A bicycle hums past, its spokes ticking out a tune too soft to catch, and I wonder where the rider is going, if they carry their own hidden map of dreams folded behind their eyes, waiting for night to lift the latch and scatter its bright rooms across their sleeping mind. I think of my own dreams, the way they arrive unbidden, how they weave themselves out of scraps of memory and borrowed pieces of the world, as if my mind collects them without my knowing, tucks them away like small bright stones at the bottom of a coat pocket. Sometimes they slip through while I am awake in the hush before dusk, when the sun leans low and the corners of the room grow soft, as if they too are preparing for sleep. I catch myself staring at the space between objects, the thin lines where one thing ends and another begins, and I wonder how much of what I see is real, and how much is built from the same tender stuff that shapes my dreams. There is a comfort in not knowing and allowing the edges to blur just enough that my thoughts can drift without needing to settle on any single answer. I boil water again, letting the kettle slow rise to a whistle remind me of the patient ways we tend to our bodies while our minds wander elsewhere. I pour the water over a sprig of mint, the leaves curling and darkening and the steam, their scent lifting into the air like a quiet signal that night is not so far now, not so separate from this small cup cradle between my hands. I sit by the window and sip, letting each swallow pull warmth into my chest, where the day's questions rest unspoken and unanswered, not because I fear them, but because they feel less urgent under this soft hush that gathers around me like a blanket pulled up to the chin. Outside, the sky deepens its colors, folding pale blue into lavender, into that velvet shade of dusk that feels both endless and near enough to touch. A single star winks awake above the roofs, and I imagine it carrying some sliver of light that left its home long before I learned to ask where such light begins. I think of the lake from my dream, how its mirrored surface held the sky so gently that I could not tell where one ended and the other began, how my reflection softened there, becoming something I recognized not by shape, but by the quiet feeling that pulsed beneath my ribs. Maybe we dream to remember that we are not fixed, but shifting water and flickering light, rooms within rooms that open in new directions each time we dare to stand at the threshold and trust that stepping through will not break us but unfold us a little more. I let the mint cool and press my palms to the mug's smooth side, feeling the way heat seeps into skin, carrying its hush deeper than thought. My mind drifts to the faces I pass on the street, each one carrying the hidden hush of their own sleeping worlds tucked behind eyes that flicker open and closed 1,000 times each day. I wonder if any of us truly walk alone, or if somewhere beneath the noise of traffic and clocks and endless small plans our dreams brush up against each other like moths passing in the dark wings whispering secrets we will never speak aloud. Maybe that is why sometimes we wake with a name on our tongue that does not belong to anyone we know, or stand at a window and feel certain we have stood there before in another life, another dream, another quiet corner of the same unfolding self. The street grows quieter, the hush of evening settling over rooftops and fences in a way that makes the air feel thick with waiting. I close the window just enough to keep the night from slipping too far inside, though a sliver of breeze still hums at the edge of the curtain, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and something sweet like wet grass. I place the mug in the sink, the last swirl of mint dark against porcelain, and I stand for a moment listening to the drip of water from the tap, a sound that feels older than anything I could name. I move through the house, switching off lights one by one, letting shadows fill the rooms, not with darkness, but with something softer, a kind of promise that when the day folds itself away, the mind knows how to find its own lantern in the dark. I pull back the blanket, smoothing the sheets the way my mother used to when I was small, her hands careful and quiet, as if the way she arranged the covers could shape the dreams that waited on the other side of sleep. I lie down and feel the familiar dip of the mattress, the way the pillow catches the weight of my head, the steady hush of my own breath weaving itself around the hush of the house. Somewhere far off a dog barks once, and then falls silent, and I think of all the small sounds that carry us into sleep, the creak of floorboards, the sigh of pipes, the soft shift of wind brushing the walls. I close my eyes and see again the lake, the mirrored sky, the tree that gathered stars in its branches, and I wonder if tonight I will find my way back to that quiet shore, or if another door will open instead, leading me down some new hallway where my waking mind has never dared to wander. I do not try to choose, I do not try to shape what comes next. I trust the hush to find me where I am, to lift the latch on the rooms I keep hidden even from myself, to remind me that each night the mind grows wide enough to hold what daylight cannot bear. And when morning comes, when I wake and stand again by the window, cup in hand, street below humming itself awake, I will carry the soft weight of whatever dream I found, like a small folded letter warm against my ribs, waiting for the next quiet moment when I am ready to read it again. I wake to rain this morning, a steady hush that fills every corner of the room with its soft promise, the kind of sound that makes you want to linger beneath the blanket for just a while longer, listening to the way each drop finds its own small path down the glass. The sky is a pale gray that feels almost like an extension of the dreams I was drifting through moments before, dreams that even now hang in the edge of my mind like threads of mist refusing to vanish completely. I lie there for a moment, eyes half open, letting the rhythm of the rain carry my thoughts back to that hidden lake, the mirrored surface now dimpled by the same quiet downpour that drums on my window here in this waking world. It occurs to me how rain has always felt like a kind of bridge between worlds, the way it blurs the outlines of buildings and sidewalks, softens the edges of things, so that for a few hours the city feels less like a grid of streets and more like an old memory we all share. I push back the blanket slowly, the cool air brushing against my skin as I sit up and swing my feet to the floor, feeling the grain of the wood warm and familiar beneath my soles. I stand at the window for a while, my breath leaving faint shapes on the glass as I watch the drops gather and slip one after another, tracing small wandering paths that catch the morning light and scatter it in quiet fragments. There is no hurry today, the rain tells me that much with its steady voice, as if reminding me that not every hour needs to be filled with movement or noise, that sometimes it is enough to stand still and listen. I fill the kettle and set it on the stove. The soft hiss and bubble a gentle counterpoint to the rain's lullaby. I find the last of the mint leaves in a small jar on the shelf, crush them lightly between my fingers, and breathe in their bright clean scent that for a moment pulls my thoughts backward through the nights that have come before this one, each dream layered on the next like pages in a book that writes itself in the dark. I pour the water over the leaves, watch the steam curl upward, carrying the green sharpness into the quiet kitchen air, and I think about how even this small ritual feels like a conversation between the waking self and that softer drifting part of me that never truly leaves the dream behind. I carry the cup to the window and sit with my knees drawn up, watching how the street below has changed beneath the touch of the rain. Puddles gather in the cracked concrete, reflecting branches that bend under the gentle weight of the weather. A single figure walks by, umbrella tilted slightly against the wind, footsteps slow, as if they too feel the invitation to pause and drift. I wonder where they woke this morning, what dream they might have carried with them out into the wet hush of the street, if they remember it at all, or if it slipped away the moment they opened their eyes, like a bird startled from a branch. Sometimes I wish I could see the hidden worlds that hover just behind the faces we pass each day, all the small drifting landscapes that shape us from within, the lakes and fields and endless staircases we wander when the world outside our eyelids grows too narrow. I take a sip of the mint tea, letting its warmth settle low in my chest, and I close my eyes for a moment, just long enough to feel the soft press of sleep still lingering in the edges of my mind. I see the lake again, but now the rain falls there too, each drop sending out ripples that fold into one another until the surface is a slow shifting tapestry of circles within circles. I see my reflection looking back, softer than before, eyes wide with a kind of question that does not ask to be answered, only carried like a lantern through the dark. I open my eyes, and the street comes back into focus, the soft gray sky, the sound of tires whispering through wet streets, the hush that holds everything in a gentle, patient embrace. I stand and move through the apartment, my steps quiet on the old floorboards, as I gather a blanket from the back of the chair and drape it around my shoulders. There is a book on the table, pages still marked where I left off, the words waiting like a soft promise, but I do not reach for it yet. Instead, I stand by the door for a moment, hand resting on the knob, listening to the rain's quiet drumming and the way the walls breathe with it, as if the whole house has settled into a dream of its own. I step outside onto the small covered landing, the wood beneath my feet damp, but not yet soaked, the air full of that clean scent that only comes when the sky has decided to wash the world for a while. I watch the rain beat along the railing, gather in tiny trembling drops that fall one by one into the garden below, where green shoots lean gratefully into the downpour. I think about how dreams are like this, two small drops of memory or wonder that gather in the hidden corners of the mind until they spill over into our sleep, stitching together moments we did not know we had saved. I stand there breathing in the rain, watching it blur the edges of the street, the fences, the rooftops, until everything feels softer, closer to the place I find each night when I drift beyond the reach of my own name. I step back inside and leave the door cracked just enough to let the sound follow me, the hush becoming part of the room, part of my thoughts, as I sit again by the window, cup warm between my hands. I close my eyes once more and let myself drift just a little, not fully asleep, not fully awake, hovering in that soft space where the mind loosens its hold and something older rises to meet it. I see the tree from my dream, its branches heavy with rain, the stars that usually gather there hidden now behind a veil of soft cloud, yet I feel their quiet presence humming above the leaves, waiting for the sky to clear and the dream to find me again. I think of all the people in their houses along this street, the dreams they cradle, the secrets they may never speak aloud, the quiet places inside them that look like lakes or forests or staircases winding ever upward. Maybe tonight, when the rain slows and the sky clears, they too will stand at a window, feel the hush settle around their shoulders, and remember for a moment how wide the mind becomes when we let it drift beyond the edges of what we can hold in daylight. I sip the last of the tea, the mint now faint and warm against my tongue, and I know that when I lie down again tonight, when I close my eyes and hear the steady hush of rain or the quiet hum of stars behind the clouds, I will find my way back to that lake, that tree, that mirrored sky. I will kneel at the shore. By the time the rain finally lifts, the day has leaned into its quiet hours so gently that I almost do not notice the way the sky begins to open in soft patches of pale blue. I stand by the window, feeling the damp air slip in through the small gap I left at the sill, letting the scent of rain-washed earth drift into the corners of the room where the hush of morning still lingers. There is a freshness now that hums along the edges of my thoughts, a clean edge to the air that makes me think of a page turned over in a book whose story is still writing itself just beyond the reach of my waking mind. I gather my blanket around my shoulders and stand there watching the street reclaim its shape from the blurred softness that the rain laid over it. Puddles catch bits of sky in their shallow bowls, and for a moment I see the faint echo of my own reflection where the water holds the light in its quiet palms. A car passes, slow tires whispering through the wet, leaving small wakes that fold back into stillness, as if nothing had ever disturbed them. It makes me think of how the mind too folds itself back around each dream, each half-forgotten drift of images, once the waking day calls us to open our eyes and step into the ordinary weight of things. I step away from the window and move through the small rooms, picking up a cup here, folding a blanket there, each small motion an anchor to the softness that still clings to my skin like the last drops of rain caught in the curl of a leaf. There is a book waiting for me on the table where I left it before the rain began its quiet conversation with the roof and the window glass. I sit and open it, letting my eyes drift across the lines, not so much reading as resting inside the gentle hush of printed words. I feel how they carry me just to the edge of sleep again, that same slow threshold where thought begins to blur, and the mind hums with the promise of somewhere deeper waiting just out of reach. I pause and set the book aside, not because I am done, but because the words have done enough for now, loosening the knot that keeps my mind tethered too tightly to the clock that ticks somewhere in another room. I stand and pour a glass of water, the simple sound of it slipping from the pitcher to the cup reminding me of the lake from my dreams, that patient mirror of sky that still visits the back of my thoughts whenever the day softens enough to let it through. I sip and taste the coolness of it, holding it for a moment on my tongue as if it might carry with it the echo of rain still lingering on rooftops and branches. I think about how each night we slip into that hidden place without needing to be taught how to find it, that the mind knows even when we do not trust it, knows when we stand at the edge of sleep how to lift the latch on doors that do not exist by daylight. Maybe that is the tender secret of it, that our minds are older than our questions, older than our fear of not knowing, older even than the stories we tell ourselves about who we are when we wake. I move to the chair by the window again, tucking my feet beneath me, the glass still cool in my hands. Outside the street is brighter now, a slow unwinding of shadow, where the sun finds its way back to the sidewalks and fences, and the small leaves that tremble at the touch of wind still carrying the soft memory of rain. I watch a pair of sparrows dart through a thin beam of sunlight, their wings scattering droplets from a branch where water still clings in silver beads. They land just beyond my line of sight, but I can hear their small voices, sharp and bright in the quiet that follows the storm. For a moment, I imagine what it would be like to drift through the world that lightly, to feel the pull of air beneath wings, and to trust that each landing is simply another beginning, another chance to pause and listen before the next small flight. Maybe dreams are like that too, not one long journey, but a series of gentle leaps from thought to thought, each one carrying us deeper into the hush we rarely touch while the sun is up. I close my eyes and let the sounds come in, the soft rush of a car turning the corner, the distant hum of a voice calling out across the street, the low, slow creak of the building settling around me. In that small hush, I feel the edges of sleep pull at my thoughts, not with urgency, but with a soft invitation, like a hand held out in a room where no one is in any hurry to leave. I think of the tree from my dream, its branches heavy with stars, and the way the lake caught each shimmer in its mirrored skin, turning light into something I could touch, if only for a moment, before it folded back into water. I wonder if tonight, when I lie down again, I will find myself standing at that same shore, or if the mind will open another door, one I have never seen before, a hallway that bends away into new darkness, bright with the promise of something waiting just beyond what I know how to ask for. I set the empty glass on the table and stand again, feeling the pull of the floor beneath my feet, the solid weight of the boards grounding me here in this room, where the afternoon sunlight gathers itself in quiet pools on the worn rug. I run my hand along the back of the chair, feeling the weave of the fabric, the small fray at the corner where I once caught it on a button when I stood too quickly. It's strange how these tiny marks, these soft imperfections, become part of the map we carry of the places we call ours. I think maybe dreams do the same, leaving faint threads behind that we carry through our days without ever seeing them directly. I step into the kitchen to rinse the glass, watching how the water catches the light for a moment before slipping away down the drain, carrying the hush of my thoughts with it, like a promise that nothing is truly lost, just changed, folded back into the quiet stream of moments that waits beneath the bright clatter of our waking hours. When evening finally comes, I stand at the window once more, watching how the last of the sunlight slips behind the roofs and leaves the sky washed in shades of soft blue and pale gold. A single light flickers on in the window across the street, and I imagine the person inside moving through their own small rituals, folding blankets, setting cups aside, perhaps pausing now and then to listen for the hush that comes when the day leans gently into night. I feel the softness settle around my shoulders, the slow drift of my own breath carrying me closer to that hidden threshold where waking gives way to something wider. And when I lie down later, when I close my eyes and feel the quiet fold itself around me like a blanket pulled up with careful hands, I will think of the rain that came and with the sparrows that found their place. By the time the sky slips fully into night, the air has turned still and mild, carrying with it the faint scent of damp stone and the last threads of warmth left behind by the sun's slow retreat. I stand by the open window, breathing in the hush that gathers between the buildings, a hush that seems to lean closer each time I let my thoughts settle, just long enough to feel it press softly against my ribs. Somewhere a door clicks shut, and the muffled thud of footsteps drifts up from the street, but these sounds feel gentle, more like punctuation than interruption, as if the world knows this hour belongs to the quiet parts of the mind that wake only when the clocks have forgotten themselves. I draw the curtain halfway closed, leaving just enough space to see how the street lamp catches the edges of leaves still wet from the afternoon's rain. The glow pools in small shimmering puddles on the asphalt, reflecting the faint shapes of branches that sway now and then in a breeze too shy to call itself wind. I think about how many nights have come and gone like this, slipping their secrets under my door, while I sleep unaware that the hush I move through each day is stitched with pieces of these hours, when the world holds its breath and the mind wanders wherever it pleases. I light a small candle on the table, its flicker soft and patient, casting a trembling shadow that dances along the walls in shapes that almost look familiar until they shift and break apart again. There is something comforting in this tiny flame, its warmth too slight to chase away the chill, yet steady enough to remind me that even the smallest light can carry a quiet promise through the dark. I sit with the candle and listen to the way the house settles around me, floorboards sighing under their own gentle weight, pipes ticking softly as they ease into the night's cooler breath. These small sounds blend with the steady hum of my own heartbeat, a rhythm that has kept its silent vow since long before I knew how to wonder where dreams come from, or why they sometimes stay behind like a soft trace on the inside of my chest long after I open my eyes. I think about the lake again, the mirrored sky that held my reflection so carefully I almost believed I could step through the surface and become something weightless, drifting between the pull of stars and the hush of water folding over itself. In the dark of this room, with only the candle's flicker to measure the passing moments, I find that lake again, not by choice, but because some part of me has kept its outline hidden behind my eyelids all day, waiting for this hour when the mind grows soft enough to remember how to look without seeing. I close my eyes, and for a moment I am there, standing at the edge where the grass meets the water, feeling the cool press of soil beneath my bare feet, the hush of wind that carries the scent of leaves and something older that has no name. The lake holds the sky above it so clearly that I cannot tell which side of the surface my thoughts belong to. I kneel and touch the water, and it does not break but gathers itself around my fingertips like silk drawn tight across a hidden door. Somewhere a bird calls out once, then falls silent, and the echo of its voice finds me here in my room, candlelight warming the side of my face, the hush inside my chest echoing back across the lake I carry behind my ribs. I open my eyes, and the flame wavers slightly, as if it too has drifted for a heartbeat into that other place where questions lose their sharp edges and become something softer, more like a hum that lives beneath the skin of the night. I reach for the cup resting by the window, its rim still warm from the last sip of tea I left there an hour ago, when the day's final light began its quiet surrender. I hold the cup in both hands, feeling the weight of it anchor me to the here and now, even as my mind slips sideways to stand once more among shadows that do not frighten me, but instead remind me that much of what I think I know is only the thinnest layer stretched over something vast and gentle waiting just beyond my reach. I wonder sometimes if the dreams we do not remember are the ones that shape us most, if the faces we never see clearly, or the voices that speak words we cannot hold onto, are the same ones that turn us softly back toward ourselves when the noise of living grows too heavy to carry alone. Perhaps the mind hides these secret rooms for us to find only when we are ready, or when the hush grows deep enough to let the latch slip open without effort. I sip from the cup, letting the last trace of warmth bloom in my throat, a quiet bloom that matches the glow of the candle and the hush that gathers in the corners of the room. Outside, the street has gone still, no footsteps, no distant car, no soft bark of a dog reminding the world that it too is awake. There is only this small circle of light, the sound of my own breath, and the knowledge that soon I will stand and draw the blanket back and lie down in the shape I have made for sleep, a shape that holds within it all the dreams I have not yet found words for. When I slip beneath the covers, I feel the familiar weight settle across my shoulders, and I let my hand rest on the space beside me, pressing my palm flat against the cool sheet, as if to say, yes, here I am, and yes, I am ready to drift. I close my eyes, and feel the hush gather just behind my forehead, that soft hum that tells me the mind is already stepping through a door I cannot see with waking eyes. I think of the hallway that curved away from me in a dream, a hallway lined with doors that opened onto fields of tall grass, oceans that glittered with moons. I did not know how to name staircases that led upward into the dark like threads of thought I would never untangle completely. I feel those doors now like small warmths against the inside of my eyelids, each one waiting with a patience I could only admire, each one asking nothing more of me than to breathe and drift, and trust that what I find inside will not break me, but unfold me gently like the flame on the table that flickers without fear of the shadows it makes dance. Somewhere beyond the window, the night deepens its hush, turning the street to a river of soft darkness that carries with it the promise that when I wake I will not wake alone, but with the quiet shape of this drifting still pressed against my ribs, like a secret I do not need to speak. And when the first pale line of dawn leans in through the window, brushing the walls with its soft brush of gray, I will open my eyes and carry what I found in the hush with me back into the day that waits with its open hands and its quiet questions ready for me to step into, its light still humming with the promise that when night comes again, I will slip back through the latch and stand once more at the edge. When morning comes, it does not arrive with any grand announcement or sudden burst of light, but with the softest shift of shadows in the corner of my room, the gentle touch of dawn finding its way along the edge of the curtain and across the floorboards that still remember the hush of night. I lie still for a while, my eyes half open, watching how the faint glow turns the ceiling into a pale canvas where my drifting thoughts paint slow shapes that fade as soon as they appear. Somewhere a bird calls out a note so clear it feels like a single drop of water falling into an endless well, and I imagine the sound rippling outward, carrying with it the secret that another day has begun, whether I am ready to lift my head or not. I turn onto my side, gathering the blanket closer, breathing in the warmth still caught in its folds, a warmth that feels like a gentle echo of the dream I just left behind. It was not a dream I can name, not a story I could repeat if someone asked, but rather a feeling of standing at the edge of something wide and green, a field that shimmered beneath a sky that seemed too big to fit inside my chest. I remember the hush of wind moving through tall grass, the sense that I was waiting for something, or maybe remembering something I had never truly forgotten. I hold on to that feeling for as long as I can, letting it rest there between my ribs, like a small lantern flickering in a room I carry behind my waking thoughts. When I finally sit up, the room feels different somehow, not smaller, but more patient, as if it knows I will carry pieces of the night with me as I move through the slow morning hours. I stand and stretch, feeling the pull of sleep still soft in my shoulders, the quiet ache of muscles that have rested but not yet remembered the weight of the day. I cross to the window and lift the curtain just enough to see how the sky has begun to open its pale hands over the roofs and trees and wires that draw their quiet lines against the brightening blue. The world looks freshly washed by the long dark, the leaves still heavy with the memory of yesterday's rain, the street empty except for the soft pulse of sunlight slipping between parked cars and puddles that catch the sky and hold it for a moment before letting it go. I step into the kitchen and fill the kettle, listening to the first small hiss of water heating against metal that holds 1,000 echoes of mornings just like this one. I take down a cup and run my thumb around its rim, feeling the faint chip on one side, a tiny imperfection that feels like a reminder that we do not need to be whole to hold something warm. I tear a few mint leaves and press them to my palm, breathing in the sharp green scent that lifts me gently from the soft edges of sleep and reminds me that even in waking there are doorways to drift through if I move slowly enough to find them. I pour the water and watch the steam rise, curling around my fingers before vanishing into the quiet space above the sink. I carry the cup to the window and stand there for a while, letting each sip anchor me to the hush that still lingers in the corners of the room. Outside I see the shadow of a cat slipping along the garden wall, its tail flicking once before it disappears behind a hedge that trembles with the smallest breeze. I wonder where it slept last night, what dreams it carries, and the quick silver movements that seem so sure even when the world is still half dreaming itself awake. I think about how we all carry our dreams differently, some tucked so deep they never see the light of day, some stitched into the soft shapes of our words, or the lines we draw in notebooks that never ask for explanations. I think of my own dreams scattered like seeds behind my eyes, drifting down each night to take root in places I cannot always find when the sun is up, but which hum beneath the surface of my thoughts, reminding me that I am made of more than my lists and plans and quiet fears. I move to the small table and sit tracing the rim of the cup with my fingertip, feeling how the warmth seeps into my skin, spreading through my chest like a gentle promise that there will be time today for both the solid and the drifting, the sharp light of doing and the soft dark of wondering. I think of the lake again, the mirrored water holding the sky so gently that I could not tell where my reflection ended and the stars began. I think of the tree, its branches gathered full of light and shadow, how each dream has returned me there in pieces, like a map that writes itself each time I close my eyes and let the hush carry me back through doors I do not need to unlock. Perhaps this is what dreaming has given me more than any answer or clear direction, a sense that the mind is always ready to open wider than I can see, ready to remind me that the world is not fixed, but shifting, made new each time I pause long enough to see how the morning light slips through leaves, how a single bird call can echo in the chest long after its song has flown on. I finish the tea and rinse the cup, setting it upside down to dry beside the sink, its chipped edge catching the light in a way that makes me smile, a small ordinary thing made beautiful simply by being here in this soft beginning. I move through the rooms, letting my hands rest on the backs of chairs, on the cool frame of a window, on the worn edge of the table, where I have left so many thoughts folded like letters never sent. Each touch feels like a quiet promise to the waking self from the drifting self, a reminder that we do not need to hold it all at once, that we can trust the mind to keep what it needs hidden until the hush of night comes again to lift the latch and invite us back inside. When evening comes, as I know it will, I will stand at this same window watching how the last edge of sunlight slips behind the roofs, leaving the street washed in that soft blue that feels like a held breath. I will fold the blanket over my shoulders, press my palm to the cool glass, and see the faint outline of my own reflection, not the sharp lines of the day, but the softened shape of someone still drifting between the worlds they build and sleep and the ones they walk through with steady feet. And when I lie down, when I close my eyes and feel the hush gather around my shoulders like an old familiar shawl, I will find the lake again, or the field, or the quiet hallway lined with doors that open not because I demand them to, but because the mind remembers how to unfold itself without my asking. I will drift through that soft place without rush or fear, carrying with me the warmth of mint, the hush of rain, the small steady beat of my own heart, reminding me that to dream is not to leave this world, but to meet it again with open hands, ready to hold whatever shape it takes when the hush comes calling.